Ed,
Yeah.
move a little this way.
Yeah, what?
Okay, sit up a little higher.
Yeah.
Okay, now smile.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's it. Sometimes, Ed, it's the little adjustments
Oh,
that make
please.
all the difference in the world. All right? Yes, that's right. Today, Ed, we're going to talk about adjustments. More specifically, topics.
Is this a chiropractor thing?
That's different type of adjustment. We're going to talk about spending in retirement and what sort of adjustments people can make, or even what sort of processes people can go through to help them make sure that they don't run out of money before they run out of life.
Right.
I don't know about you, Ed, but for me, even people with significant wealth, that tends to be the number one question they have when they hit retirement.
Yeah, everybody asks, the 4% rule and all of that. How much can I take out? And when will I run out of money?
Yep.
And I always ask them the same question, when will you die?
Yes.
You give me the date of death, I can give you the exact calculation.
So you already brought up one with the 4% rule. So really, when I think about retirement spending, right?
I just say that because everybody says that.
Yeah, no, of course. Listen, it's a prominent rule for those who are not aware, which I think most people would be aware if they're listening. But the 4% rule, made popular by planner Bill Bengen years ago, where he researched. He said, what's the largest percentage that someone could take from their retirement portfolio and not run out of money over a 30-year span? Now, of course, he used historical returns,
right?
And so there's no guarantee that those same historical returns would still be true today. But what he found was if you took 4% out of a retirement account, or really just from 4% of your assets each and every year, that you would not run out of money in any of the periods of time that he analyzed. But again, that doesn't mean that the same would hold true today. So
just to put numbers on it, it's not that much. You'd have to have $1 million just to generate $40,000 of income.
Correct. Now, of course, that is separate and apart from any Social Security someone might have.
No, just on that.
But yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
From your portfolio, that's generally what the 4% rule would assume, right?
Which doesn't seem like a lot.
It doesn't. But if you're trying to make dollars last for 30 years, and the other thing is to inflation adjust those dollars. In other words, 40,000 year one, Ed, but in year two, maybe 41,000. Year three, 42,000, and so forth, to make sure that you're keeping up with inflation. That's kind of what the research showed. Now, it's fair to note, though, that 4% was the percentage he found where it was the highest percentage where there were no failures, effectively.
Right.
But that means
even to your 90s and so forth.
Well, for a 30-year period, right?
Yeah.
But what was interesting, or what you think about then, that means that every other scenario except the worst case he analyzed, someone made it through those 30 years and ended up with money. Right. In fact, in many of the cases he analyzed, someone would have started, let's say, retirement with $1 million, started taking the 40,000, inflation adjusted it each year, and maybe ended retirement when they died after 30 years with $5 million left, $6 million left, way more than they started with, which may or may not, comport with their goals. If their goal is, I'd like to leave my kids a big inheritance, it's pretty good. If your goal is, I hate my kids and I want to spend every dollar, you've done a bad job if you die with $5 million, right?
But I just don't think, we've talked about this before, anybody can bring themselves to spend their last dollar as a plan.
It definitely is. Well, that gets to the heart of our discussion today, Ed, which is how do you think about adjusting your spending in retirement to stay on track? And staying on track is about spending and to help achieve your goals. If your goal, again, is I want to leave a significant inheritance behind, then dying with a lot of money inside your accounts. And when I say dying with a lot of money, I don't mean like unexpected at a heart attack. I mean living a reasonable life expectancy, things going quote unquote according to plan. Then you might have to adjust upwards your spending in order to account for that if your goal is just to enjoy your retirement to the fullest extent possible.
Now, the old school people, I know, like my parents' generation, the World War II generation, they always said, never touch principal.
Yeah, that's very good when you have an interest rate. And we're finally back to a meaningful interest rate today, but for a long time.
But people do think like that. Well, I never want to see that go down.
Yeah, well, again, if your goal is to leave an inheritance behind, that's not a bad idea.
No, the goal, forget about beneficiaries. I think in those cases, their goal is they never want to leave themselves in case there's something that comes up, big cash, medical, whatever it is. They never want to go. They want to have that cushion.
But that cushion effectively means if you never go below your principal, you are theoretically going to die with the amount that you started with, which
Well,
again,
that is.
But that if your goal is not to leave behind an inheritance, you've shortchanged yourself.
No, that you can have both. I mean, they're going to get the inheritance, but that wasn't driving it. The thing that was driving it, as you get older, you worry about running out of money.
Yes.
And they never want to see that balance go down.
So if we think about like ways in which people structure their retirement distributions today, I could think of like 3 or 4 different ways that people set up their accounts and think about taking distributions. Like one of them would just be, a fixed dollar amount, right? So they start and they begin taking, let's say, $100,000 a year beginning the year they retire, and they take $100,000, exactly that amount, every single year. Effectively, this is the classic annuitization. Now, you can do it with a real annuity, or you can just kind of pseudo-annuitize your own money, if you will, and just take the same dollar amount. The nice part, if you will, is if you use an annuity, you have some protection, right, Ed?
Right. You have guaranteed payments for life. I have those myself.
So there's some benefit there. The downside to, like, let's say a regular annuity that is fixed over an annual basis where there's no increases is that you won't keep up with inflation over time.
But they have riders and stuff like that, and you pay for all of those
You
things.
do. So if you can certainly add inflation adjustments to an annuity, but I think there's 2 things worth knowing. Like today, well, one, if you add those riders, it means you're taking less income day one than you otherwise would.
That's what I mean. You pay for it somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, it's always going to be there. And the second thing is there's actually, there used to be products, I think, but I know today for a fact that we don't have any true inflation-adjusted annuities. You can get a 2% or 3% every year, but it won't actually take into consideration the true cost of living because the insurance carriers are worried about that type of risk, taking it on. So, but that's one way, right, is taking a fixed dollar amount over the course of your life.
Well, that's like the worry-free way.
Well, worry-free, it might feel good, but again, if you live a long time, 20, 30 years, $100,000 in 20 or 30 years is not going to be worth what $100,000 is today. So the benefit there is that you have the guarantee of income. The downside is
lifetime guarantee.
That's right. Lifetime guarantee potentially, right? But the downside is you're losing some inflation protection.
Yeah, spending power. Yeah.
Yep. Another possibility would be to take, let's say, a fixed percentage each year, a la, as you brought up before, the 4% rule. Now, the upside to this is that if you do this kind of on a regular basis and you structure your initial percentage at 4% or some reasonable percentage that you believe is going to last, you should be able to make it throughout your entire retirement and not run out of money, and also to have a predictable income stream, right?
Right. Obviously, you have to figure in what your cost of living is, your expenses.
Sure. And look at that growing over time and with inflation as well. Now, the one thing that is challenging about that, though, is if you just take a fixed percentage of your dollars each year, then you end up, a fixed percentage of your initial dollars, I should say, you're discounting any changes that occur in your portfolio. For instance, if it's a really bad market, you retire into a bear market.
Oh, yeah.
Taking that percentage, that flat percentage that you started with, well, the challenge there is
larger.
Yeah, but much higher percentage, right? If you start taking 4% out of $1 million, that's fine. But now if you go, let's say the market drops, and just to make our math easy, let's say it drops by 50%, the same 40,000 out of 500,000 is 8%.
That's called sequence of returns risk.
Indeed. One of the most important things that retirees should be mindful of. Those initial retirement years, the few years just before, the few years just after retirement, like a red zone of risk for retirees.
Right.
The returns in those years.
It's hard to come back from that.
It is. The returns in those years have outsized importance. But it can also work to the upside, right? Where if those first few years of retirement are really strong,
right,
taking out, again, a fixed percentage of those initial dollars may mean you're not taking out enough. Again, it depends upon someone's goals, but that's...
That's where I said before, the goals, has to cover your spending.
Yes, that's exactly right. But someone may say, hey, if the markets do well, I want to spend more. Well,
right,
if you're taking out this flat percentage, then that doesn't do it. Now, you could say, well, I'll just, instead of taking out 4%, like 40,000 year 1 and 41,000 year 2, 42,000 year 3, and so forth, you could say, well, I'll just take out 5% of my portfolio every year or something like that. The challenge there, though, is you have a lot of variability in your income, right? For instance, if your account value is $1 million in year one, that's $50,000. If in year two the account is dropped to $700,000, now you have $35,000 to live on.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing we haven't discussed, we're talking about this income as if it's all spendable. What about taxes?
Yes. Well, taxes have to come out of that percentage, which is, further going to erode that.
A living.
Absolutely. Yeah. And can significantly erode that further. So,
So you know what I did?
What'd you do?
Well, we talked about having guaranteed income for life. And I always say this in my consumer seminars when I talk about annuities like you were talking about. I said the only thing better than tax-free income for life.
Actually, I think you were going to say the only thing better than income for life.
Yeah.
Let me explain to you what you were about to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's what I always say. Except for right now that I did said it backwards. All right. The only thing better than guaranteed income for life is
what is it, Ed?
Guaranteed tax-free income for life. When I say that in seminars, people light up. Where do you get? In other words, you just keep all the money? I did it myself because I have annuities in my own Roth IRA. Not only do I have guaranteed income for life, but if I take it from there, it's guaranteed tax-free income for life. Now, I haven't done the whole thing. I still have a stock portfolio in there, but it's a good cushion against a guardrail, a buffer.
Yeah, and so, that's one way in which you can make sure that you don't outlive your money. Another way, and a way that was made possible, or not possible, popular by an article written a number of years ago. Jonathan Guyton, a financial planner, made this largely, really raised this possibility, was this thing called gutters and guardrails, right? The idea that you would put some bands around your percentage distribution, so that, for instance, if in year one you started out taking 4%, you would make yourself some decisions at that point to say, hey, as long as each year my account is, my distributions are between 3 and 5% of my portfolio, I'm not going to change anything. But if on the chance that the markets do poorly and my distribution is too high, then I'll adjust my income each year downwards. And the opposite too, saying, hey, if the markets do well and my withdrawal rate is too low, that's actually, it sounds like a bad thing, a too low withdrawal rate, but that's actually a good thing. It means your account balance is too high and you're not taking out enough, that you could take out more. And this gutters and guardrails approach actually has a really, really profound impact on helping individuals to make course corrections throughout their retirement and not only avoid running out of money, but to avoid drastic changes in their income from one year to the next. So definitely changes from time to time as markets move and account values change. But it's one of the more effective ways, in my opinion at least, of helping individuals to make sure they don't outlive their money, but also spend enough each year. It's amazing what a few minor changes early in retirement can do and how much of an impact on a 30-year retirement spending pattern they can have.
But again, you have to be able to manage your expenses, and sometimes that's out of your control. Medical bills hit and things like that.
Yeah, and those are the shock expenses that often derail a retirement, for sure. Long-term care certainly would be one of them. Probably, that's probably the single biggest one that most retirees worry about. And, there are certain ways of mitigating that, whether it be long-term care insurance or, in some cases, individuals who have not, who have either not accumulated enough assets or have done certain planning to make themselves look like they have not accumulated enough assets, can, enroll in Medicaid. But that is more or less effective depending upon which state you're living in.
Yeah, that's generally not a good plan, but it is the last plan for some people.
Yeah, it's. I think people prefer choice, and when you have Medicaid, you often lose a significant amount of choice over the type of care you can receive.
Well, on that happy note.
All right. Well, listen, the most important thing is that people, when they're looking at making their retirement decisions, right, they're doing so with an eye on the future. Retirement for a lot of people today is 20, 25, 30 plus years. And what you start with on day one of retirement very quickly changes. You know, I'm fond of saying when someone comes into the office, their financial plan is valuable, it's meaningful, and it helps us make good informed decisions. But at the end of the day, it's already out of date by the time they have walked out of the office. Things change. We need to change to accommodate. And so it's important to develop a spending pattern in retirement that helps keep track. That helps you. You need to figure out how you're going to adjust your spending in retirement to make sure that you're going to not outlive your money. Sometimes that means spending less today to have a little bit more buffer later. Sometimes that allows you to spend a little bit more today because you have the buffer. But you got to know what you're doing.
Yeah, the problem is the unknown, like you were talking about. The market's up. So the advice is retire into a rising market.
That's right. Only retire when there's a good market into the future. We're going to leave it at that. Yeah. Hopefully you're clairvoyant and you've picked up some stuff here today from the Great Retirement Debate. Ed, always a fun time with you.